Guy, we are here in your library at the Aquamarine Offices. Tell us a little bit about this spectacular place.
So, when I moved from New York to Zurich, I wanted to create an oasis where I could think straight, which I felt I could not do in New York. And one of the things, I had an extra room available in the office, and I set this room up such that it would enable me to think. So there is no phone line into this room, there is no internet, and there's no computer, and all we have is books. And the only thing I can do here is read, have conversations, and maybe doze off if I want to doze off. And by the way, I would add that I'm a deep believer in Monish Pabrai's injunction to take a nap every day. I think that whenever I do take a nap, I wake up with a better sense of priorities of what's important, a better sense of judgment. So I think that it can help with one's investing. And I have the book room here divided up into a few sections. So I subscribe to a lot of publications, and I buy just about any book that looks half interesting. They first will make it onto my Amazon wish list, and then over time, every now and then, I buy a bunch of them. And so we have here, you can see all the books that I haven't yet read. They come in here and they go into the unread shelf, and then we also have a whole bunch of publications that are unread, which need to be read over time. Then over time they get read, and either they get the books and the publications once they're read usually get thrown out. The books either get passed on to friends, or they get moved to other parts of the library, which are places where I keep books that have become old friends that I want to keep around even though I've read them once. But my goal is to have at least a third, if not more, than all of the books in this library be unread in any particular moment. Of course, the book that's read, we already know what's in it, and what's more interesting are the books that are unread. So that's what's going on in this office.
Well, let's take a look at a few books that you've read and a few that you still plan to read.
Well, what do we have here on the unread shelf? We have Keith Richards' A Life. This book actually was recommended to me by Tom Gaynor at the airport, and he got some great insights from it. So that's one that I haven't read. And we have one here written by a friend of mine called The Rabbi and the CEO. Why not? I haven't read that one either. There's one actually here that I have read called by Keith Ferrazzi. He was a TED speaker, and he talks about never eating alone. I'm not sure if I agree with him, but it's always worth reading what Keith Ferrazzi has to say. And what else do we have here that, there's Too Big to Fail here, which I should have read by now, but it's sitting here. We all know about this book. It's an important book. We have another unread book here. We have Too Big to Fail. In the Plex. This was recommended by Charlie Munger. It's supposed to be a phenomenal insight into the way Google operates. And what else do we have here that is perhaps interesting?
I see Good to Great and King of Oil.
Yeah. Some of these are books that I should have read a long time ago, but I haven't. Then if we go around here, I guess that here we have a whole bunch of books that the average value investor would love. We have a couple of copies, a couple of versions of Security Analysis. So this is kind of like what everybody wants to have in their library. We have a more recent edition of Security Analysis here. And we have Marty Whitman's book, The Conservative Aggressive Investor. I actually have a copy of Seth Klarman's book, but it's at home, so I can't show it to you right now. Here we have George Soros's book, The Alchemy of Finance. And we have, it seems like, 2 copies of this book, Power, that was very popular in the United States at the time, and it's kind of an update on Machiavelli's injunctions to a prince. It's got quite a bit of dust in it. It hasn't been opened for some time. What else do we have here that would be interesting to talk about? I mean, when Buffett purchased the railroads, I found this book on Amazon, which really was just something to look through for fun. But it gives a history of the many different railroads that there were in the United States. And at the time I was thinking I might pick up some shares of some railroads.
What was your ultimate conclusion on railroads?
My ultimate conclusion was that Chris Hahn had gotten to it before me, And at the time he was a big investor in Union Pacific and another one, I don't remember which one, CSX. And I was following the CSX position pretty closely, but Warren Buffett says that you need to invest when it's like shooting fish in the barrel. And he says not just fish in a barrel, it's fish in a barrel and all the water's out of the barrel. And that was not the case either with Union Pacific or CSX. And another way of putting that is that if you see a clear triple with downside protection, that's probably a go. If all you see is a double or less, it's probably not a go. Here's another book about American Express, which really is just a coffee table book, but it's fun to pick up these things and to have them around. Of course, here we have a copy of The Snowball, familiar book that was written by Alice Schroeder. And we have another book here that I'm sure is on many people's shelves. I really am so impressed with what Warren Buffett has written. Warren Buffett, I've just called Monish Pabrai Warren Buffett. Monish, you should be pleased.
Well, you're not the first one. So.
But this really is a phenomenal book. I think he wrote succinctly and presented some ideas in a very simple way that are extremely powerful. And this alone probably is enough to turn you into a great investor if you learn the lessons well. Of course, the real issue is to learn the lessons well. What else do we have here?
By the way, while you look, I'm wondering which Buffett biography your favorite is. Do you prefer the Lowenstein book or?
There's no question I prefer the Lowenstein one, although I think that Alice made a valuable but controversial contribution to the understanding of Warren Buffett. And there's actually, I see another copy of The Snowball there. Various other books. There's a biography of David Cameron here. So,
David Cameron, who was your classmate
there
at
ain't
Oxford.
a book about me like there is one about David Cameron, but this will be one of the early biographies of David, and really a big part of what this was about was to get all the stories about David Cameron out there before the election. I think this came out before the election. And there are also some things which either are out of place or just happen to be here. I mean, I have a whole bunch of poetry here. There's a whole book here of John Donne's poetry, which I used to read a lot of. I should really spend... I have friends who would say that the more I read John Donne's poetry, the better my investing will get. And it's not a proposition that I've entirely tested. There's also... a book that I've only dipped into, but I think that Charlie Munger would say is a phenomenal book, is Boswell's biography of Samuel Johnson, who was a very colourful figure in, if I'm not mistaken, the 18th century. And so I have a collection of the letters of Samuel Johnson. Somewhere else here that I can't find right now is a collection of the letters of Ronald Reagan. I've said this a number of times that Ronald Reagan, what I like about Ronald Reagan is that he spent his afternoons, by reputation, he spent his afternoons in the White House either napping or engaging in correspondence, and he managed to get Gorbachev to tear down the Berlin Wall, so that seems to me to be an extremely productive way to go about being in the world. And if I could take naps in here and write letters to people and achieve even 1/100th of what Ronald Reagan achieved, that would be great. And we all know, while we're at it, that copying the great people is a very smart thing to do. So in my own way, I'm doing a little bit of copying of Warren Buffett, copying of Monish Pabrai, copying of Ronald Reagan. Another guy that we have on the wall here actually is we have Thomas Edison. Nestled amongst the photographs of my children, we have a photograph of Thomas Edison. And I think that the best quote that I have from Thomas Edison, which I love, is he said that he was finding so many ways not to make a light bulb that eventually he couldn't help but succeed. And I think that that's just such an empowering statement. And if I keep running out of ways, if I keep trying, I'll run out of ways to fail in life, then I'll succeed. And that simple attitudinal change would probably help so many people put more success into their lives. So, one more book here. which actually was really influential on me at the time. This is a great book to read. And I actually feel like a tremendous failure in comparison to people like the Tisches. I mean, the Tisches built their empire through hotels initially. And they were really good at taking over these hotels and making them flow cash in tremendous ways, and they learned an awful lot through it. They were great operators, and it's a great book for anybody who hasn't read it. Just don't ask me for my copy, because I want to keep this copy here.
Guys, speaking of great operators, tell us a little bit about who you admire the most among public companies. Obviously, you have Buffett, you have the Tisches with Lowe's. Who else do you have on your watch list and would love to be a partner with at the right price?
Oh yeah, I mean, and they're all too expensive. Lucchese is going to be interesting. They have had an amazing run, an amazing track record. They're an amazing set of partners. They clearly have a great relationship with each other, Steinberg and Cummings. The question is what's going to happen going forwards. And they've been a favoured partner for Buffett. I mean, at one time they had Berkadia. I think they may have a partnership together right now. I think that Prem Watts has been an amazing guy and harder to follow because it's not as easy for me to understand the investment moves that he's up to. And I haven't entirely agreed with some of his investment moves, even the ones that have worked out really well. For example, he was buying massive amounts of puts on CDSs at the time, and it was a great way to play that by buying shares of Fairfax. But Fairfax is another. I mean, we all know Markel Corporation. And the wonderful thing about these great partnerships, whether you have Steinberg and Cummings in the room, or whether you have Tom Gaynor and Steve Markel in the room, you can palpably feel the partnership. You feel the way in which the two partners like each other and work off each other. So that's an amazing partnership that I think will have a lot more written about it in the future. Who else really impresses me? Nobody else is coming to my mind right now. There are various people who are potentially great people in the making, and it's just too early to tell. And some who are just interesting to follow, who may not make great partnerships, but it's going to be really interesting to see what they do. If I try and move to Europe, there's a guy called Carl, I think it is, Siem is his last name. And he's been an investor in ships and shipping industry and in various different kinds of offshore company. And from time to time, their shares have traded at massive discounts. And by and large, he's been very fair to shareholders. There's another guy with whom I had an investment at the time, a guy called Graham Hossey, who's been building up a junior miner called London Mining. Again, extremely talented guy, who's been an amazing capital allocator. And it's going to be interesting to see where he goes. These are not people they're not old enough to be in the same league as Berkshire Hathaway, but have already developed, or Markel or Lucadia, but have developed interesting track records. And God willing, now that you and I, John, are here in Europe, we'll find more Europeans doing that. And the great thing about the way the world has changed is that you can really now base yourself in Europe, and even though Europe, by the nature of the social welfare state, high taxes, less immigration, is a less dynamic place, you can base yourself in Europe but still look for stuff outside of Europe and look for stuff in Asia and the United States. I think it's never been easier to do that. In the past you had to be more proximate. It's not that necessary anymore.
Well, Warren Buffett is in Omaha, and we know the world doesn't center around Omaha, so
Yes.
we can't be too wrong being in Zurich.
From your mouth to God's ears, John.
Guy, thank you very much for this tour of your library. We will now go on to our mandatory nap. So
I need to have lunch first.
Okay. Thanks, Guy.
Yeah, my pleasure.